apologies from Assembly Member Eshalomi, Assembly Member Devonish, Assembly Member Dismore, Assembly Member Pigeon, Assembly Member Twycross and Assembly Member Whittle.
Thank you very much.
You think there was an election?
And I've got one announcement, and he's not in the room. But can we congratulate Assembly Member Sean Bailey on being elected as Deputy Member of the GLA Conservative Group? Yeah. And he turns up.
Not Deputy Member.
Deputy Leader. Deputy Leader. Deputy Leader. Congratulations, Assembly Member Bailey. Right. Let's go to item 2. Can I ask the Assembly to note the recommendation set out at item 2? The revised list of offices held by Assembly members has been tabled. Do members have any other declarations to make relevant to the items on the agenda for today's meeting, including in relation to gifts and hospitality, which are not yet reflected on the authorities' register? None? Thank you. And then we'll go straight into part 3, and the principal business for today is a Q&A session with Deputy Mayor for Transport, Valerie Shawcross. Welcome.
Thank you.
And the Commissioner for Transport, Mike Brown. Welcome, Mike.
Thank you.
And we're going to put questions and hope to get some full and forthright answers on the policies and work of TfL. There are 3 lead-off questions, and Assembly members may ask supplementary questions after each question has been answered. And the first question is in the name of Assembly Member Copley. Over to you.
Well, thank you very much, and good morning, colleagues. So, last week we published the Mayor's Transport Strategy, and alongside it the draft local implementation plan guidance for the boroughs, which also merits a close look. And it was on the 13th month of this administration, and of course it had been delayed because of the election, and of course we've had some very sad tragic events recently. So the Transport Strategy is the 25-year document. It is available online for those of you who haven't had a hard copy, and it is a draft at the moment, and the consultation period closes in October. The document has 3 very broad themes, and this is how we are aiming to improve the lives of Londoners. The first broad theme, as we've talked about before, is that of how do we achieve a healthier population and a healthier environment in London. So the theme is around what we're calling the Healthy Streets agenda. So it's the investments that we want to put into London to make walking, cycling and public transport the preferred available means of getting around the city, and over time shifts people's travel patterns away from dependency on private cars and move people towards those active, healthy ways of getting around the city. There will be, we understand from medical advice, profound health impacts from getting people to walk at least 20 minutes a day, and also very much address not just the air quality in London and reducing the carbon production in London, but actually make the place a better place to live, so a less car-dependent society. The second big theme is a better public transport experience. So investment to reduce overcrowding, investment to improve information and ticketing, a huge programme of disability accessibility, step-free access, things like improvement in hearing loop facilities, making public transport not just available but a very much more a pleasant option and choice, and an easier option and choice. And then the third big theme, of course, is using the public transport investment, tying it in very closely around the Mayor's regeneration plans for London, because transport facilitates the development of new homes, new jobs, And I think we will be going beyond previous activities in some ways. For example, using some bus investment to open up development and regeneration around London. So, you know, the future vision of the city, I hope for Transport Now has got a coherent basis, and for future policy issues, we've got a test against which to measure it, whether or not it helps support the achievement of the targets in here for the environment, for modal shift, and for the reduction of pollution, and the achievement of a zero carbon economy in the long run. So that's the overview, but I know there will be lots of specific issues that you want to pick up.
Thank you very much, Deputy Mayor. I wanted to start off with a few questions about devolution of suburban rail. The Mayor's draft transport strategy says that the Mayor aims to create a London suburban metro. Given this is in the government's hands, will you call on all London MPs of whatever party to put pressure on this minority government to support rail devolution in London?
Yes, we've taken, I won't say it's a risk, but we've taken the step in the Mayor's transport strategy of putting in two really key elements for the future that will make a big impact, not just on the quality and the experience of people's journeys, but our regeneration in London, and that is investment in Crossrail 2, which we need to do a lot more work on, and the other one, big one, is rail devolution. The more we look at it, there isn't a faster, cheaper, more effective way of rapidly improving public transport, particularly in South London, in London, than making better use of the rail services, the rail track we've already got. So we've really reasserted our aspiration for that devolution, and we need it to continue to be a cross-party, all political levels campaign, because, you know, I think everybody knows that this, when TfL has had an opportunity to take over the franchising arrangements for national rail services, aka the Overground and TfL Rail, the reliability and the quality of those services has really gone up. We are really short of public transport capacity in South London, so we want to make the best use of what we've got. I don't know if the Commissioner wants to add anything.
Well, yeah, perhaps if I may, I mean, just to echo that, I think if you just look at the example of the Tube and compare that with the possibility of what you would get with a South London Metro model within the Mayor's control and within our control. So the Tube has basically operated with the same physical footprint for the last 17 years. However, we are now carrying twice as many passengers per year on that network, and that's because we've invested in new trains, we've prioritised junction improvements, put in new signalling systems. That is the sort of prize that is open to us on the South London Metro if we are having a proper and full seat around the table to lobby for investment priorities. And I think it's really important that people understand this is not just about new routes. Crossrail 2 is vital, as is the Bakerloo Line extension and other infrastructure projects mentioned in the draft strategy, but actually it's also really important to properly exploit the existing ironwork, if you like, that's already there.
Yes, and speaking now as a relatively new resident of South East London, I'm particularly keen on this. I mean, the difference in the quality of service you get on at Catford, which isn't on the Overground, compared to if you get on at Sydenham, which is quite remarkable. Val, can I ask you a further question? I mean, does the Mayor's transport strategy work if suburban metro services are not devolved to the Mayor?
We would suffer a deficit, I think. I couldn't give you any figures off the top of my head in terms of our, development and regeneration in South London, and certainly housing. Because if you can increase the reliability and the quality and ultimately the quantity of the services, it does promote, more housing development. But, you can see the difference in the economy of North and South London simply in the house prices. You can see it in the fact that employers in South London have said to us informally, they find it harder to recruit people because the South London rail network is struggling. So we do need to get this work done. Your original question was about lobbying, and I have to say I'm very encouraged that the Mayor's Office and the Secretary of State for Transport are already talking in this new period about a date, so they're at the practical conversation level about getting together and talking about our future transport aspirations for London.
Well, I'm glad there's conversations happening. Just finally, in December, Chris Grayling said he wanted to integrate operating teams between train services and infrastructure. How does this apply to the London Overground network?
Well, I've been having some discussions with the Chief Executive of Network Rail about what more we can do to respond to that and to work with that model. I think it is true to say, though, that actually the dynamic of the relationship between us from the overground track perspective and indeed the TfL rail bit, the first bit of the Elizabeth line, the relationship is already quite different. So we are very much on the case of trends of failures, repeat failures, things that go wrong on that piece of infrastructure. So actually, in a way, we have a virtual alliance, if you like, already in place with Network Rail. So I just want to continue to exploit that, to continue to push that agenda to ensure that our aims and aspirations are properly aligned. So I'm not sure, from our perspective, it means that we have to change things. I think we just have to keep doing more of the same. It's also worth saying, if I may just go back slightly to Val's previous answer on lobbying and everything, that we're not just waiting. I wouldn't want Assembly members to think that we're just waiting for a change of policy from the government on devolution. We continue to give input where it required on existing refranchises, notwithstanding the decision that's been made. So, for example, on South Eastern, which is out to refranchise at the moment, I wrote a very long, detailed letter to the Secretary of State a few months ago to outline our expectations and aspirations as to how the construct of that franchise, albeit in a model that we would rather wasn't there, how that would best serve the needs of passengers, actually, as it turns out, both within London and also further afield.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Assemblymember Cooper.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wondered if we could dig in a bit more into Crossrail 2, because it's such a huge concern for almost all of my constituents, and having just had the pleasure of coming to City Hall this morning on an extremely overcrowded Northern Line yet again. Anyone who gets on anywhere past Tooting Broadway and tries to come north during the rush hour, you know, we've got those island stations at Clapham Common and Clapham North, and I am actually really worried about eventually someone's going to fall off a platform. And indeed, we've already had someone whose coat got caught in a tube train at Clapham South and almost got dragged into the tunnels. So it is really that urgent. My worry is, of course, that it wasn't actually in either the Conservative or the DUP election manifesto. It didn't get a mention in the Queen's speech. I know there's a lot of lobbying going on. I've got all the local businesses lobbying me, and I would commend the work that Stephen Hammond, the MP for Wimbledon, has been doing about Crossrail, as well as Rosanna Allen-Khan more recently. Can you give us any comfort in terms of likelihood of us getting the hybrid bill into Parliament in 2019? Because that's the deadline that Michelle Dix tells me is absolutely critical.
Shall I take that?
Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So well, thank you for your support, because I know you amongst many others around the Assembly members are hugely supportive of this. And you're absolutely right. I actually came up on the Northern Line myself this morning as well, so I know exactly what you mean. And you know, we're running 30 trains an hour on that part of the Northern Line. It's a pretty reliable service, but still, it's not able to cope with the growth and the further growth that's going to happen. Of course, the A24, well populated with buses, doesn't actually have much scope for additional buses either. So there really is no choice but to get Crossrail 2 in place. I also read with interest, and I'm sure it wouldn't have escaped your notice, that only last week, First Group, who are part of the consortium that's going to be running southwestern services from the summer, we're talking about a 45% increase in capacity on their routes into Waterloo. It's hard actually to imagine how Waterloo and indeed Clapham Junction can continue to function in that scenario with that increased capacity. Never mind the challenges we already well know about Euston with High Speed 2 coming in and how people are able to continue their journeys from there as well. But to answer your question, look, we continue to lobby, we continue to make very compelling cases, I think, for not just the benefits for Crossrail 2 for the immediate transport imperative, but also for the growth agenda, which of course is very close to what the Mayor seeks to do and as outlined in the transport strategy. So 200,000 new homes we suspect will be able to be built as a result of Crossrail 2. A lot of it will be in the regeneration of the Lee Valley area, but in other places as well, in the southwest of the city too. And some 200,000 new jobs will also be created as a result of this. That doesn't actually include all the jobs during the construction phase, many of which, some 60,000 we reckon, will actually be outside London and South East. London South East area, proving yet again that investment in major infrastructure schemes in London is of huge benefit to the national UK economy, including actually Northern Ireland. So interesting what you said about the DUP. But I would just say that the lobbying does continue. Lord Adonis, now confirmed as the chair of the National Infrastructure Commission, has been very firm in supporting Crossrail 2 as a project of national importance and one that should be considered. The funding reality, I do get the imperative that London has to be seen to be paying its share of the capital costs of the project, and that's something that we've been working very closely with others in the Mayor's team to ensure that that is bottomed out and taken care of, working with Treasury and the Department for Transport. I believe we've got a slam dunk business case for this. This is a railway that has to be built, because whatever else you do with the underground, 36 trains an hour in each direction on the Victoria line in the morning peak, that's at the top of the world tree in terms of capacity. You can't add any more to these small, narrow Victorian tube tunnels on the Northern Line. You have to build new infrastructure to support it. So we'll continue to lobby. All efforts and energies from the Assembly member colleagues would be hugely appreciated. But Michelle is absolutely right. Michelle Dix is absolutely right that we need to keep the momentum going to get the second reading of the hybrid bill within a 5-year parliamentary term, because if we don't, then, as you will know, we have to go back to square one again. So it really is imperative, I think, that decisions are made within the next few months.
Yeah, I convene a 2-weekly lobby group, for want of a better word, where we bring together key people from the Mayor's closest office, TfL, Crossrail 2, and our public affairs teams to keep on the case. And I think one of the things that's very, very clear is that the business community are extremely concerned to make sure that we get this. This is the future growth driver of London in the 2030s. This will be the key driver of growth in London for the 2030s. But I think alongside it, I would say that we, especially because we talk also to the national elements of the business community, we are also concerned to see this project as part of a national picture of infrastructure development, and it isn't an either-or situation. We strongly want to see, the Northern Powerhouse Rail, or whatever it's called, because all of that infrastructure fits together as a picture of national growth in the post-Brexit period.
Well, just on that point, and I've just been very parochial and just spoken mainly about South London and South West London. Of course, the benefits for North East London, Assemblymember McCartney, is very eloquent on this subject as well. But you're tying it together with the needs for the whole of the national economy. And I think one of the things that sometimes gets lost is that, essentially, as I understand it, that Crossrail 2 pretty much washes its face in terms of the amount of funding that's needed because of the growth that comes from it, and then subsequently the growth in income from additional taxation. So it's not an either-or situation. Investing in Crossrail 2 adds to the income of the government in the long term, and should not be seen as something that is posited against other projects. Would you agree with that?
It's got a fantastic cost-benefit ratio, and TfL has already put in an outline business case that shows that we can fund 50% of this. I also think it's worth noting that not just does it wash its own face in a short period of time, but it will make High Speed 2 viable for London, because as it currently stands, High Speed 2 will generate enormous backlogs, bottlenecks at Euston if it doesn't have Crossrail 2, which is a complementary scheme in some ways to High Speed 2.
Thank you.
Assembly Member Dr. Sahota.
Well,
Morning.
good morning. When Ken Livingstone was the Mayor of London, he had a London plan that had a policy on the allocation of street space. There was a straight hierarchy of road usage. And of course, when Boris Johnson came along, he abolished the hierarchy.
Yeah.
And people thought this is a bad thing to do. The current Mayor's transport strategy doesn't have a hierarchy of road users. Why is that?
Well, we may not be using the same language, but in effect it does. It says that we prioritise walking, cycling and public transport. You know, however, there are areas of London and there are functions that need to be carried out where it's clearly essential to have vehicle traffic. But we think a lot of it could be done more efficiently. There are some fantastic models, for example, of freight consolidation in central London, where the business improvement districts have been very active. We want to be able to spread that kind of practice at a large and a small scale around London and make freight more and deliveries more efficient. And we want to make more public transport services available for outer London so that people are not forced to use their private cars. The population growing as rapidly as it is means that we have an enormous problem of road space availability. It's most obvious in central London where traffic congestion arises, but everywhere people are being feel swamped by heavy vehicle traffic. Go and have a look at the Tolworth roundabout at rush hour, it's murderous. So, you know, I think the traffic reduction strategies that we talk about when we've put out the local implementation plan guidance to boroughs should start us being able to make some inroads into reducing car dependency elsewhere in London and not just within the congestion charging zone. I hope Dr. Sahota, that you appreciate that this is the first transport strategy that's got health targets in it, because we do see that promoting active transport is going to have an enormous beneficial effect on London's inactivity crisis and health crisis.
Well, Abella, I recognise that and congratulate you on putting healthy streets as at the core of the strategy. But the London Council said that they previously said that they would benefit, right, from having a explicit recognition of hierarchy and how boroughs can look at it. Do you intend to put a road hierarchy into the London plan so that the local authorities have a clear direction, right, of how to look at planning applications?
It is in there. We've just not used that particular language. It's very clear the priority is walking, cycling, public transport, right, and obviously essential traffic freight. So you will see...
So how will you give it teeth?
It's given teeth in the local implementation plan where we will be funding healthy street schemes. Mike, do you want to add anything?
Well, yeah, and I think it's. I mean, just to sort of emphasise that. First of all, just to say that public transport, of course, improved public transport is the greatest contribution to more walking and cycling. Because by definition, people walk to their bus stop, walk to their underground station, or whatever it happens to be. So actually, they do come together really coherently. I think the other really important thing is that Will Norman, his appointment as the Mayor's Walking and Cycling Commissioner, which is a new post, a different post than we've seen in the past, does really bring together this whole aspect, not just in central London, but very importantly, I think, in boroughs across the city. And I visited 4 boroughs just in the last 2 weeks. And I have to tell you, both in central London and in outer London, and this cuts across all political parties, there is a huge consensus on the exciting nature of improving cycling provision and improving decent walking routes in all parts of the city. So I think that is really important that we kind of continue to pursue that and support the boroughs. And as Val said, the LIPS guidance is very clear as to putting, not a sort of straitjacket around local authorities, but clearly giving them some clear guidance as to what we would expect them to be prioritising.
If you're asking about the London plan as well, I have to say that, I mean, I sit alongside, Jules and the other deputy mayors regularly on our London plan discussion sessions, and we are feeding the Healthy Streets approach, which is this hierarchy approach, into the London Plan development, and you'll see that very clearly. Things also like protecting freight consolidation sites for the future. Also, we have a growth board where James, Jules and I and our professional colleagues are looking at the schemes we will fund and how we approach them. So there's a very joined up approach between the strategies, and you'll see the teeth being delivered in the other plans.
Thank you for that, Val.
Sorry.
Okay, Assembly Member O'Connell.
Thank you very much. And it's very helpful for Onka to tee me up nicely talking about the hierarchy. And welcome Val and Mike this morning. It's great to see you both. From your hierarchy, the motorist clearly is sort of rock bottom in your planning in the new strategy. And whilst clearly we would support the fact that people need to be more active, and we kind of get all that, I need to perhaps point out that in your strategy, it seems to be that you're clobbering the driver. So my first question really, Val, to you is that regarding road pricing, which is inherent within the strategy, and it's probably been better if the Mayor's been here, because it's a political question, and I regret that he's not here, but it's always great to see you, Val, is where was road pricing in the Mayor's manifesto a year ago? I didn't see it, though I perhaps didn't study it as closely as some of my colleagues.
Well, you know, I would say the growth of the population in London means that we have to address the proportion of people and journeys who choose the car, because we simply do not have the road space to continue with a population driving at the percentage levels that they do. 64% of journeys at the moment are walking, cycling, public transport. As the population grows, we've got to make sure that there isn't a net growth of car driving. We do not have the road space for it. We're not talking at all about clobbering the driver. You'll see there's, there are some really key benefits, I think, for essential car journeys. So if you can reduce traffic congestion, it does. Is the mic gone off?
No, sorry, I was having noise. It's off.
If you can reduce traffic congestion, it does make the journeys you've got to make more available and efficient. The reference to road pricing in here is basically to talk about what would we do when we come round to technically refresh the congestion charging equipment that is there at the moment. The cameras and the technology which is operating the congestion charge system at the moment is 15, 16 years old. And when we get to the stage, and bearing in mind this is a 25-year document, so this is just a hook in there, we need to look at what would be the appropriate technologies for the refreshing of the congestion charge system, basically. So that is not a short-term plan in there. That is saying there's a hook in here, so that when we look at the congestion charge system, what do we do next with it? And of course technology has moved on. It was something that the Assembly's Transport Committee, cross-party, recommended in your document on congestion. So I think what we're saying in here is that we don't have a detailed plan at the moment, but that's certainly something we think we should be looking at.
Okay. I mean, Val, you didn't answer my question about the manifesto, but let me just move on, because within the strategy it states, and bear in mind the motorists, I think there are many motorists around this horseshoe already. We pay road tax, MOT, fuel duty. We motorists do already pay a fair whack towards the exchequer, which is correct. But within the strategy, it says we must address the fundamentally inadequate and unfair way that road use is paid for, with motorists paying too little and, in effect, being subsidised by public transport fare payers. And many people on public transport clearly have their fares subsidised as well. How would you respond to that?
Well, you know, the problem, Steve, and this is something that my colleagues are raising with the Treasury, is that London gets absolutely not one penny of the road tax that goes to the National Treasury. We get no money at all for our roads, which is deeply unfair and incoherent. And actually, the Treasury are going to have to look at this. The other thing I would say is that, you know, over time, as we are going to be pushing, and I know nationally there will over time be a trend to go towards electric cars, zero emission technology, you know, there won't be fuel duties being paid. So I think the government itself is going to have to look at how do we pay for our road infrastructure and its maintenance in the future. So there will need to be responses to technical changes. Mike, did you wanted to come in on this one?
Well, yes, just really to reinforce that point, if I may. So in blunt terms, the strategic road network in London, once a strategic road, A2 for example, crosses the London boundary, there is no money from the government for us as TfL to maintain that strategic road network. Whereas Highways England, who are responsible for the roads, the A2 just outside London, do get money for repairing and maintaining that piece of road. Now, there is no logic I see in that. The only logic that might have existed previously was when we got an operational grant from the government. They might have argued that that was partly to take care of such maintenance provision, or to make maintenance provision within our budget. Of course, that grant is going to zero, as the government's made very clear to us, and therefore there simply is not the money for us to maintain that road network. So therefore that is something we are lobbying and working very hard on.
I still don't see that as a reason to clobber the motorists. Now, is a thread running through the plan. I'll talk about car parking now, because there's a piece within it talking about restricting car parking spaces in new developments. So will you be amending the London plan to make that direction?
That's something we're discussing for the London plan, and that will be about what is possible within the location. So, you know, if we are able to provide good new public transport, then it makes it more feasible for there to be car light developments, for there to be, you know, decisions taken to try and intensify housing development around public transport nodes, which means that they are less dependent on cars.
Well, I would suggest that is already happening, and often that is a good thing, and often it's very difficult.
It is to some degree.
Lastly for me, you talked about LIP funding, which is highly valued by boroughs. Are you saying, therefore, that in the previous mayor's discipline around LIP funding was kind of a bit more relaxed? It allowed boroughs to have a bit more freedom in the monies that they bid for, and that was appreciated. Are you saying really that now LIP funding application coming up to you will be very strictly governed by the aspiration and the hierarchy plans within the strategy?
I think we try to strike the balance. I mean, that guidance is out for consultation. I mean, the structure of it is broadly the same. You know, there's a formula element and there is specific things that we're trying to achieve. But, you know, the point of having a strategy is that you try and deliver it, and we see the LIP process as a way of helping support and deliver it. But, you know, we've all had a lot of contact with the boroughs and spoken to the boroughs and visited the boroughs and talked to them at London councils and locally. And I feel that the Healthy Streets agenda is very much based on the kind of aspirations that the boroughs have got already. You know, we opened a scheme in Kingston, Will Norman and I, they're kindly invited to cut the ribbon. And from that piece of funding, in fact, I think that was strategic London funding, they've opened up a fantastic walkway accessing, a promenade accessing the river, because their access to the river wasn't good, a cycle route, a new bus stop, and improved the planting and the local public realm. That kind of scheme is the sort of thing I see coming out of the LIPS programme, public transport interchange improvements, road safety schemes, and there's just a complete overlap, I think, of what the boroughs are trying to achieve locally for their communities and what we're trying to achieve in the Mayor's Transport Strategy.
Okay, thank you. I mean, really, the only way I think that people in outer London and in South London will probably see some sense around this is to see a marked improvement in public transport in outer London, so that therefore demonstrably see an effect whereby they may then be able to get out their car. My last point, thank you for the comments around the tram. It's good to see the fact you can talk about the extension and particularly about the capacity in Croydon Town Centre. Appreciate that piece, and I'll continue to talk to you about it over the coming 3 years. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor McCartney. I want to ask you about cycling, if I can. Your draft transport strategy did not mention cycle superhighways by name, but talked about a London-wide network of cycle routes. So can I ask, will you be announcing any new cycle superhighway routes or any indication of the routes that you intend to progress?
Yes, Will is working actively on a number of routes. He's talking to boroughs and relevant organisations such as the Crown Estates Paving Commission and the Royal Parks and others about a number of specific routes. I think construction on the north-south route is going to begin this year, which is the one we announced last year. He's working on the CS11, CS9, the route that originally proposed over Westway. All of those things are actively being worked on. I have to say, if you ask me how they changed, there's a big component now of making sure that there are adequate pedestrian facilities alongside crossings and so forth. By the end of this year, the quiet ways, I'm really interested in the quiet ways as well, because they're very much for everybody. They're not long-distance commuter routes. They're your local community. By the end of this year, we're opening them very, very rapidly now. There'll be 100 kilometres of quiet ways in London. So, and of course, we're carrying on with the roundabouts, the safety scheme around major junctions and roundabouts and gyratories. So those things are progressing. But, you know, we are negotiating on a number of them at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think that's right. No, it is absolutely right. The only thing I might just add, just as an aside, because sometimes it doesn't get talked about, is that the Santander Cycle Hire scheme is also been expanding. So since May last year, we've had 400 additional docking stations put in place. Now that makes a contribution to encouraging people to cycle in parts of London, which I think is a really important one. It is, you know, the largest cycle hire scheme in the world, and I think one of Will's aspirations and our aspiration is to ensure that cycling is something that is attractive to all Londoners, not, I think, just a sort of specialist group that perhaps at some times has been identified with in the past, and that's something that these plans will help develop, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yes, because looking at your potential for increasing cycling, it looks like much of that potential will have to come from women, ethnic minorities, younger and older people from your analysis. Can I ask, does that therefore mean that your ambition of 70% of Londoners living within 400 metres of a high quality, safe cycle route by 2040 mean that those routes will be segregated?
Well, I don't think all routes will be segregated. Clearly, the whole range of whether it's mini Holland schemes, whether it's quiet way schemes, which Val referred to, or indeed dedicated cycleways, obviously depends on the environment, depends in the particular context. And there are obviously key busy routes, predominantly within central London, where segregation is very important, and you know the significantly improved safety record that we've seen as a result of that segregation speaks for itself, and I think that's really demonstrating a worthwhile investment in those routes. But clearly there are other parts of London that is just not possible because of the layout of the road or the size of the road network. So I think it is about very clearly working with boroughs, working with other local communities to ensure that we get the right balance. But what we really want is an increasingly connected network where people feel confident that there is a safe line of route for people to move around London safely and effectively on their bike, and I think that's something that we're increasingly seeing the potential of.
Okay, and can I ask about your cycling targets? In the 2010 Mayor strategy, the previous Mayor had a 5% modal share by 2026. In the updated 2015, that percentage of modal share was dropped because it was said that it was not appropriate due to population flux. Can I just ask, what is your target for cycle journeys? Is it going to be just number of cycle journeys, or is there a percentage you're going to attach to journeys?
Do Do you know what? I'm having one of those blank moments.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure I know that off the top of my head. That's something we can certainly get back to you if we may, because I'm not sure I have that immediately to hand. But
that would be helpful.
Yeah, no, there is a target, and I just can't remember it.
That's good, because what I could find in the strategy itself was for 80% of journeys to be made by sustainable modes.
That's correct.
Public transport, walking and cycling. But there was no breakdown between those different modes.
Well,
so the breakdown would be
Actually, there is. There is a technical document of the research data that went into here that we are also publishing. It won't have a glossy cover, but you can have it. It will be publicly available, and it's got all the graphs and the breakdowns and the analysis and some of the broad modelling. So those figures do exist, and you can have them. And I wish I'd brought it down with me today, because I would be able to flip through it.
I've had a look at the cycling analysis, and it talks about potential. It doesn't talk about actual targets. So that would be that would be useful. Thank you. And then can I finally ask, we've had the 3 Mini Holland schemes that are at various stages of development, but in the Mayor's manifesto he said he would complete the rollout of current town centre cycling improvement plans and begin a new round of schemes. I'm just wondering, when are you planning to roll out those new town centre schemes? I think that's particularly important for outer boroughs to improve their cycling infrastructure.
Yes. Well, again, I can share with the Assembly members after the meeting the detail of those programmes, but suffice to say, and you make a very good point, that actually a lot of the focus for the Mini Holland schemes is in the outer London boroughs, where there is a huge appetite. I mean, I'm certainly finding, as well as we go around the boroughs, a huge and increasing appetite for boroughs to introduce these schemes. So I'll get you the rolling programme in detail of when those will be. I mean, it's clear there's some still to complete of the first tranche, but we do intend to keep the momentum going here.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Assembly Member Bailey.
I just want to circle back to road pricing. Obviously, London has lots of traffic, and we all want to reduce the traffic, and there's an environmental impact as well. But has any modelling been done on the huge cost of implementing this? And also, does the Mayor have the legal powers to do that, to implement road pricing? Because surely you're talking about a system that either measures how long you're on the road or when you're on the road, both. And that means massive infrastructure and also a cost to Londoners, because surely we will need something in our vehicles to deliver that. Mike, please.
There certainly would need to be a consultation for any changes to the existing congestion charge scheme, and that would obviously have to happen as a matter of course. I think, though, in terms of the cost basis, and Val did allude to this earlier on, that if you think back to when the congestion charge system was originally put in, which was in the early years of TfL and under the first mayor, actually that was a very clunky sort of on-off type system. So it was really quite unsophisticated, if you like, in terms of its construct as implementation. Of course, digital technology, the reality of the technical systems that are available, and we have done some preliminary looking at this, allow you much greater flexibility and much greater in-the-moment ability to adjust systems, adjust how you record vehicles, etc., going in and out of various zones. So, I think this is the sort of thing that we would need to be looking at if and when we got to the situation over the lifetime that this strategy refers to, 25 years, as to what system we put in place. But the technology is hugely different. So actually, yes, it's not, doesn't cost nothing, but actually the marginal cost for individual cameras and individual systems is, of course, reducing all the time as technology improves.
So you're suggesting the cost wouldn't be, astronomical?
No, I think clearly there would be a cost. It would be an infrastructure cost, but it's quite different from, as I say, the very clunky sort of analogue style system that was put in place originally.
Okay, and how much of that cost will be bared by the individual motorist? I get that it might be directly hard to give me pounds and pence now, but the worry would be that it would add a huge additional cost to car ownership, and many people have to own a car. They might not want to, but they have to own a car, and the jury's out of road prices, a good thing or not, and a big cost to every individual Londoner who owns a car would tip it one way, I imagine.
Well, I think there's always going to be a balance here. I think the Mayor's transport strategy is quite clear in terms of the aspirations to get an improved public transport network to ensure that as many people as possible have and indeed walking and cycling people have viable alternatives to needing to use their car. So just to follow up in the answer the Deputy Mayor gave to Assembly Member O'Connell, that actually it means that for those journeys that still do require a car, they're on less congested roads and people are able to get around more quickly, which helps everybody's way of life. So I think this has got to be a balance. We don't have the full detail of this. This is a 25-year strategy. There isn't a absolute firm timeline or a firm date put in the strategy on this, and clearly people will have different views as to when and how this could be implemented. But suffice to say, I think in a great city such as London, that is really leading the way now around the world in having a more healthy streets approach. As somebody said after we launched the strategy last week, this strategy is about moving people, not about moving vehicles. And I think that is what defines its difference from anything we've had before.
If you want to see exactly what the Mayor is going to be doing in the next 4 years, or 3 years now, you need to go back to the business plan that preceded this, because that's the plan for projects and expenditure. And you will see that the focus of expenditure on the car technology issue is all about the ultra-low emission zone and its expansion. So that's what the focus is on the current Mayor's term. It is about installing the appropriate technology to deliver an ultra-low emission zone.
But if I listen to Mike is suggesting that technology is not relevant to road pricing technology, it'd be something different. So it feels like an additional cost. We'll pay for the ULEZ and that'll be fine, but Mike's suggesting that there'll be a different cost.
Well, I think what I'm really suggesting is actually that technology continues to evolve, and there are sophisticated ways of applying new technology to look both at emission zones and indeed at road user charging more broadly, if that was something that we ended up doing. So I think there are, all I'm trying to make the point is, I think instead of just a rather binary one-dimensional bit of technology that we had originally, technology has moved on hugely in terms of what is possible now.
Okay, thank you. And just one last question, Val. Does the Mayor have the legal power to do this?
To do what?
To do road pricing. If you read this manifesto, it suggests that he'll be able to track when we're in our cars, how far we've driven, what type of car we have, all that kind of stuff. I'm just an innocent question. Does he have the legal power to do that?
Okay, I think you're reading too much into this. I think the Mayor has powers around congestion charging. And if we change the congestion charging technology, there'd clearly have to be a consultation and a legal process, and that is where his legal basis would rest for congestion for any system that shifted towards a more road user,
in my defence, the word road
by
pricing
mile
is used.
approach.
I don't feel like
So the Mayor's legal power lies in the congestion charge. It's a zonal approach. So, and the congestion charge, at the moment, we've got no plans to change that apart from we were looking at an issue about private hire vehicles, and we are, of course, looking at using the zone for the first stages of the ultra-low emission zone. So that's what's on the cards for that. If further down this 25 years, a future mayor or the current mayor re-elected, depending on how it goes, wanted to do some work on road user charging, as far as I understand it, it would have to be based on his legal powers to impose congestion charging as it is at the moment. And you will see that the guidance to boroughs does make the point to them that if as part of their road reduction strategies or their local transport strategies, they want to look at some localised schemes of localised congestion charging, then that is something that we at TfL would be willing to look at with them. But that is something we would expect, I think, for them, for the boroughs to be coming to us to talk about.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. I'd just say road pricing sounds like an advance on congestion charging when you read it in this. Thank you, Chair.
Chair, Assembly Member Bailey, you can always approach the Assembly Secretariat to raise that as a legal query on your behalf if you want further clarification.
I would love further clarification, thank you.
So do speak to Mr Williams about that.
I will do that, thank you.
Okay. Assembly Member Cooper.
Thank you
very much, Chair. And actually, I want to continue on the subject of the ULEZ, the ultra-low emission zone. And I just wondered if you could explain the current thinking behind the dates for the rollout, which I'm now finding slightly complicated. So my understanding is that it's the Central London ultra-low emission zone is going to start from April 2019, that the London-wide ultra-low emission zone for non-compliant heavy vehicles such as buses, coaches and lorries is going to start from 2020, but then the Inner London ULEZ for all non-compliant vehicles is going to be rolled out from 2021. If that is correct, my understanding is correct.
There is actually a diagram in here, Leonie, and I'm just trying to find the page.
That is correct. That's the way you, if I've heard you correctly, I think you are correct on that. Yeah.
So why did you decide to do that rollout for the ULEZ in that way for Inner London from 2019 and not proceeding to Outer London until 2021?
Okay, so we do have a cross-agency working group on air quality, which has been trying to direct the consultation processes and receiving the legal advice. So we've been going through consultation processes, as you know, in stages, and we've been testing out different approaches with the lawyers. So you have to make sure that what you're doing is reasonable and legal and isn't going to be challenged because in some way it's imposed an unreasonable burden. And we also have to make sure that, you know, the practicalities make sense for people in terms of the rollout. So bringing forward, if you remember, the previous mayor's proposals were to do ultra-low emission zone from 2020. And so our current mayor was looking at, given the air quality crisis, what could we do to try and, what could we reasonably bring forward to get cracking with this at an earlier stage. And I think the evidence is there's a huge public support for the mayor tackling our air quality crisis. So the T charge, which is proposed to come in this October, is kind of like a very early marker to not just to tackle the worst and most polluting vehicles in central London, which is in the congestion charge zone, so we're using that technology there. But it's also an alert to people that there is more coming, because even doesn't matter how much publicity you give, it does seem very difficult to communicate to people in their complex and busy lives exactly what's going on. So we believed that would be the first reasonable date we could get something working to alert people that there is a programme now and a direction of travel. The expansion of that central initial, so there's the T charge and then the ultra-low emission zone. The expansion of the ultra-low emission zone to the inner London area, which is basically inside the North and South Circular, because that was a new concept, it was felt that there had to be a bit more time to allow people to plan and adapt, because it's affecting a bigger population than had been expecting. So that's part of the way the programme has been shaped up. But I think that in the long run, everybody's going to benefit in London from the spreading of the bus, coach, heavy goods vehicle, ultra-low emission zone to the whole of London. And I think that's going to have a very, very profound impact, because of course the heavy goods vehicles, the longer distance vehicles, are very, very, very much more likely to be diesel. And of course that is principally the biggest cause of the particulate pollution.
So essentially you're trying to balance the worst first, but implementing it in a way so that you're still giving some reasonable time for people to adjust and find out that these things are coming down the pipe from September this year.
Exactly.
Yes,
Exactly.
and I think just go, Val, if I may, you alluded
Page.
to buses and heavy goods vehicles. Well, again, you know, all buses will at least be Euro 6 compliant by 2020, which is a key milestone along this pathway, of course. And of course, from next year, for double decks, we will only be buying either hybrid, fully electric, or fully hydrogen buses, which I think is a really important step forward. You know, we just saw outside this very building a few months ago the world's first ever pure hydrogen double-decker bus. So again, as technology continues to develop, we'll continue to review whether we can do some of this faster, but it's quite an ambitious programme. I think it's absolutely right that TfL vehicles, buses, are leading the way in this.
It's page 88, Leonie, I've finally found it. So it's the Central London 2019, the London-wide ULEZ in 2020, and the Inner London, you know, the spread ULEZ in 2021. So that's the bit that people weren't expecting, that we felt needed more time.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Assembly Member Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning. I'd like to ask you about something you said earlier, Val, about your priorities in the transport strategy were walking, cycling and public transport. Now, in your definition of public transport, does that include black taxis and PHVs or not?
I think the priorities I talked about were healthy streets, which is walking, cycling, public transport, improving passenger public transport, and then regeneration and growth. So, you know, those are not the only issues in there. It is a broadly based document. Taxis and private hire are in here because they are an important part of the mix. And certainly the black taxis are disability accessible, and you can see that there's a strong emphasis on that. And you need, obviously, in a city to allow a certain amount of choice. But clearly, we do have a problem in that the private hire growth, I think, has got out of balance, and it is causing significant problems of congestion and otherwise.
I mean, I know in some of this you're restricted by legislation that comes from Westminster, but what plans have you got to try to restrict the numbers of private hire vehicles and their growth as we go forward?
Well, I think Val mentioned earlier on the possibility that we're considering, this is in the public domain, that we're considering the exemption from congestion charge for private hire vehicle operators. I think that may be a contributory issue that will help to that. I think it's also about ensuring that there is a balance across the city in terms of the significant role that black taxis play, and Val alluded to one very important issue, which is fully disabled accessibility of those vehicles, and also, you know, the professionalism of the drivers, the knowledge that they've got, the significant investment they've put in themselves to what is a demanding and challenging job role, and serves London very well, I think. Balancing that with, of course, the freedom that you want for private hire vehicles to be able to develop their market, and also actually recognising some very small private hire cab firms play a very important local role in some outer London communities in particular. And you know, what you don't want is for people to have a real dependency on some of those small companies which have been in business sometimes for decades. You want to ensure that's looked after as well. So you're right, it is a balance. We do have limited statutory powers, as you imply, about actually putting any sort of cap on private hire vehicles. I wish we did have some capacity to do that, because actually, if you look at what they're doing in terms of congestion hotspots around the city, they are playing a significant role.
Can I just pick up on something you said there, Mike? Because one concern that I get from a lot of constituents is about private hire vehicles in outer London, particularly around Heathrow, parking in residence streets, residence permit parking bays and so on, which can cause congestion and reduce the quality of life of residents, you know, in areas where private hire vehicles collect, you know, the honeypots, as we sometimes talk about. Yes. Particularly, you know, one road that I would mention is Spout Lane North, which is very, very near to Heathrow, and I've had a particular issue with a resident there having lots of private hire vehicles parking in the streets illegally in bays which are supposed to be set aside for residents, and that's one issue. There's other issues I've had in ULEZ and so on, people writing to me. This is something that's happening. They're effectively breaking the law, whether it's a civil law or a bylaw or a local council law. What are you going to do about that? Have you got anything, you know, in the pipeline to deal with this behaviour, which just seems to go on and on and on, and nothing gets done about it?
Well, clearly this is a challenge, and I'm very well aware of the issue that you refer to, and again, I can share with you perhaps separately some of the detailed work that we're doing around the Heathrow area to see what we can do with the local borough around there. I think what I would say is the number of enforcement officers that we're employing within TfL to ensure that private hire vehicles, both individually and collectively, are properly applying the standard that they should be working to has increased enormously in the last year, and we've got a huge number of still in training, but we're gradually rolling those out into the street, and that I think is making a real difference already, Val, in terms of proper targeted activity to address not just the issue you're talking about, but more broadly the issue about applying for hire and other issues that we sometimes get raised to us where there are violations, if you like, of what private hire vehicle drivers should be doing. So I think, you know, there's a balance of activities we've got to take here, but I do agree, and I think I recognise hugely how distressful it is for residents to have that type of activity going around in their neighbourhood.
I do appreciate what you're saying, and the enforcement officer numbers have increased, but there are, you know, 2 or 3 specific locations, as I mentioned, Spout Lane North, ULEZ, Hillingdon Fields, and so on. Can I sort of meet with you and just flag up these, you know, specific things that constituents have written to me about, and see that, you know, in these places where there are ongoing issues over a number of years, that despite the increase of enforcement officers that haven't been sorted out in these specific areas, which our voters, you know, that we serve, are having their quality of life affected. We need to sort out these specific things. Can we make sure that we can do something for those specific areas?
I'd be very happy to meet with you and discuss that for
Thank you. I'll just pick up one other thing in the transport strategy. Proposal 74 talks about, it says the Mayor through TfL will raise the safety standards for all customers travelling by taxi and private hire vehicles through effective and transparent regulation and enforcement. Now, I've asked the question a couple of times to the Mayor and other officers. If you would let us know how many private hire vehicles and drivers are licensed with Uber as the operator. And I was told, no, you couldn't do that. Will you be able to tell us that? And is there a reason why you couldn't tell us? You know, I'm just guessing at the moment that there's 40 or 50,000 drivers, but I don't know.
Do you know, David, I'm surprised that you've been told that, because clearly, because at the moment we're doing a consultation with the operators about the future licensing fees for those operators, because there is a proposal to boost the numbers, the income that is received from operators for those licenses. That's been very much based around the number of drivers those operators are operating. So the figures have been, you know, are definitely available, and I don't see any reason why
could you let me know
you
so
shouldn't
that,
have
you know,
them.
constituents
I
who
think
have asked
there
can
is
find out?
an understandable legal sensitivity about focusing on any one particular operator. So if you asked for all of the numbers or all of the operators over, say, 2,000 vehicles, I think that would probably be available.
That would be
but
fantastic.
if you ask for one, then there's an understandable...
Yeah, of course. Who would be the best person to ask?
But if you come through my office, I'll make sure you get the right answer.
Thank you very much. That's great. Thank you. Fantastic.
Assembly Member Duval.
Issue, and just briefly about, and I think, Mike, you said around technology, when technology becomes available, we know that's constantly evolving and speeding up in some cases. But Val, in answer to the question to Assembly Member Bailey, you talked about, look, in this document, it really is what's in the business plan we're really concentrating on. We've got no long-term plans, but in the direction of travel of the document, it's quite clear you are supporting the Transport Committee's assembly plans for road charging, in the sense their direction of travel, I think, under the previous Transport Committee that was said, this is where we should be going and it's the right direction of travel. Can we then talk about then, that if 2021 is the key issue of where you are, and there may well be some of the business plan, there may well be some issues around tolling a Silvertown link, if that's, you know, in terms of goes according to plan. When do you think you would start talking about an extension of road charging? You alluded to local congestion charging schemes from the boroughs. So have you got, is there active proposals from boroughs that are coming through? Can you give us some timeline of these issues?
Well, no, because this is a 25-year document, and it's obvious that, you know, we have much more detailed ideas about what we're doing when the closer up. But clearly there are some proposals in here which are hooks for the future. And, you know, Transport for London's immediate focus is on delivering the business plan, and that's where we are. And of course, the future activities that go on under this are very much influenced by the manifestos of the future mayors, and, you know, the transport strategy gets reviewed. So we can't nail down exactly what's going to happen in 15 years, say, on some of these issues. However, we're trying to set a direction of travel and build some consensus towards what London needs. Clearly, Silvertown is a short-term issue, because that project is well underway, and the tolling strategy for that is about funding that scheme as well as demand management, i.e. Trying to reduce the likelihood that the crossing will generate, as it were, yet more traffic. So that, in a way, is a separate issue.
Okay, can we just turn to river crossings then? In a 25-year document, I must be right in thinking we're not even going to consider looking at these strategic crossings until 30 years' time under this criteria and under those issues. Would it not have been far more honest to say, actually, this mayor doesn't agree with these strategic crossings, as some of my colleagues, rather than do it this way? Maybe, or ask Mike, Silvertown link is aiming to be completed by when?
2021, yeah.
Right, and when do you think you're going to get the DLR to Thamesmead?
Well, that is the next...
Roughly?
That will be soon after that, I would think.
Soon after that?
Yes, I mean, and I think that's, you know, that is something that the Mayor's made very clear is a priority, and certainly when I talk to Bexley and other boroughs, you know, there's a huge appetite and interest in ensuring that project is...
When do we think the government will produce, or Highways Department, the lower Thames crossing?
Well, that's more difficult to say, actually, categorically.
So I'm right in thinking it's 20-odd years, 25 years?
Well, I think what the strategy very clearly sets out is a phase of river crossings to ensure decent connection and connectivity in the east of London, with a focus on public transport provision as part of that. So it's very clear to me that I think people sometimes describe Silvertown as just purely a road. Well, actually, it is a road with very significant public transport capability.
I don't need persuading.
So,
others may do.
Others may indeed, which is why forgive me for just making the point, because it is really important that if you get 36 buses an hour, as you will be able to do through Silvertown, as opposed to the very limited capacity you've got in the existing Blackwall Tunnel, that it absolutely transforms connection and routes and possible journeys by public transport across the river to the east of the city. And in particular, I should emphasise that it is absolutely compatible also with improving walking and cycling, because we're looking at what provision can be made, for example, for carrying bikes on specially adapted buses potentially through the crossing as well. So that's all being factored into that consideration. But I think if I may, it is a long-term strategy, as Val said, but it does I think lay out, and Val's got the page open, so I can tell you the page if I can.
235.
235, which actually shows, I think, the phasing of these projects over time.
I think it's just true to say that once Silvertown has gone in, and the Rotherhithe Canary Bridge pedestrian tunnel, pedestrian bridge, the public transport extensions like the DLR, and maybe or maybe not the government's Lower Thames crossing. At that point, you would want to be mapping and modelling how demand is shifting and changing. It would depend on what regeneration projects are going on, what development plans there were, what are delivered. You can't say now exactly what you will be needing in 20, 25 years' time, but the commitment is to start doing the technical work and looking at what's needed going forward throughout this period.
Before I call you by next Assembly Member, can we welcome Avondale Park Primary School, Kensington and Chelsea, to the Chamber? Welcome. Okay, we have Assembly Member Copley.
Thank you, Chair.
Val, in May 2016, the Mayor said TfL is now assessing the capacity for development for a further 300 acres over and above the initial 300 acres identified as part of TfL's development of its surplus land. Can you share the results of TfL's assessment and explain whether you will be bringing forward any plans to develop additional land?
I'm sure we can share some of that information, and Mike is just looking through the notes, whether we can do it now or not. Transport for London has very much sought to boost the development, the proposals for development of housing, in particular affordable housing, on its land. And James and I meet regularly with TfL Housing and TfL Commercial and the GLA housing staff to look at projects and developments being brought forward. And indeed, Mike is now a member of the Homes for Londoners Board, and it is our intention to have on TfL land 10,000 startups by the end of this Mayor's period. So there's a lot of effort being applied to bringing forward sites, working with our GLA colleagues, sometimes looking at what grant can be applied to make sure that we are boosting our housing development proposals.
If I may, Val, just
Yeah.
sorry, if I may just add to that.
Go ahead.
I think what I was just going to say was that we welcome hugely the Assembly Housing Committee recent report, Homes Down the Track, a Marathon and a Sprint for TfL, and I think because that acknowledges that yes, we need to keep the momentum going, but that we are leading the way in the public sector with some of this work. I think it's very important to note that in 2016-17 we brought 5 property sites to market. That's 1,000 new homes, 50% of which will be affordable, which will be our overall approach to housing within London on our sites, and we continue to work very closely, as Val alluded to, with the Mayor's office, with the boroughs, to unlock dozens of additional sites on hundreds of acres. So we're not done yet. I think we're exploring...
When you say dozens of additional sites, are you talking about in the acres that have been identified already, or are you talking about these additional?
No, additional even to that, because I think what we're discovering is there are slivers and pockets of land that traditionally people wouldn't have thought were perhaps potential for development, but when you have a proper discussion with boroughs, and interestingly enough, as recently as yesterday, I was out with the leader of Barking and Dagenham, where we had a really good discussion about how we could be exploring sites adjacent to some of the underground stations in that part of the capital, and where we can exploit jointly some further opportunities. So I think as we're getting more sophisticated in doing this, rather than just look at the very simple ones where we've just got the clear ownership, we're looking in partnership with indeed Network Rail and
doing some land assembly.
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask? Because I mean, we've as you've mentioned our housing committee report, which we released last week, and we on the committee are concerned, based on the research that we've done, that the Mayor won't hit his target of 10,000 starts by 2020. So, according to the available data we have, indicates only around 13 of the 20 sites currently identified, which will ultimately deliver some 4,500 homes, which is less than half the target, will actually start by the 2020 deadline. Are you concerned that the Mayor's going to miss his target of 10,000 starts by 2020?
I am going to be working flat out to ensure he doesn't, and indeed that we keep the momentum going, and that's why identifying additional sites is part of this equation. So I think actually our current trajectory is very favourable. As Val said, I do sit in the Homes for Londoners board. It's a very useful board that the Mayor has set up, and I'm delighted to be part of that board. And I think the way we're working with the Deputy Mayor for Housing has transformed in the last year, and that whole relationship within the wider GLA family is really beginning to pay dividends, and we've got this common objective. So I'm actually more optimistic. Of course, we will be responding to the report in the fullness of time. So I don't want to go into every detail, and as you know, it's only been out just a week or so. But I do recognise the need for continued momentum here for sure.
Could I ask you very quickly one final question? So, £1.1 billion in income and 10,000 homes, projected targets for development of the 300 acres initially identified. This second 300 acres that the Mayor talks about, do you have any projections for income and number of homes that could be built on that?
We're still working on that at the moment.
Still
So I don't have the detail of that yet.
But there are figures that we've got to meet within the business plan.
There are.
Yes.
So we do have to meet the business plan targets.
Okay.
I would also say that as well as the acreage, Tom, there's an issue about what procurement frameworks we're using, and as well as the TfL procurement or property framework, because we're now doing this really good close working with our GLA colleagues, we also have access to the GLA's property panel, its partners, its commercial partners. So very much trying to get a horses for courses approach now to maximise the amount of land that we do get brought to market and developed.
Thank you very much.
Michelle.
Thank you, Chair. Well, I've got a couple of questions on step-free access. The first one is about the strategic approach in terms of the implementation plan as well as the overall transport strategy. What is the Mayor's sort of broad strategic approach to accessibility?
Okay, so in terms of the underground, we've been looking at desired journeys, i.e. we've tried to look at beginning to end, and have therefore not been looking in an ad hoc way, but looking at, you know, where do we need, what areas of deficit are there. So the broad approach is to basically try and double or speed up, or halve I should say, the time it takes to make a step-free journey across London. So there has been some science towards what would you need to do, which stations would you need to improve to make it possible to speed up any journey you take with a wheelchair by public transport by about 50%. And it does show that there was a deficit of step-free stations in North West London, which is one of the reasons, and I think Outer London generally, one of the reasons why Harrow on the Hill was one of the early announcements in Newbury Park, looking over this way, on the other side of London. But actually, because we've got £200 million worth of investment to put in during a short period of time, we are also looking not just at where they need to go, but what methodology we can apply to get maximum value for that money. So very shortly we'll be announcing a tranche of additional step-free station projects, which are not just designed to fill those geographical gaps, but is also designed at trialling some new technologies and methodologies. One of the things Mark Wilde often says to us is that sometimes we're applying, TfL have been applying very high, I wouldn't say gold-plated, maybe brass and bronze-plated investment standards to projects on the underground where we don't need to do that. So we're looking through the next tranche of examples to pilot some step-free access projects that are, you know, that work but actually are trying new technology and are cheaper to install.
Are this part of 200 million step-free access fund, which was announced in December?
Yes.
Okay. The next question is that in the implementation plan, there's a reference to step-free access and 3 time frames for delivering those. Yeah. Can I ask you whether the first time frame, which is 2017 to 2020, will stations like Harrow on the Hill be delivered for that sort of period?
Yes, and the work is starting now, as Val said, on Harrow on the Hill and Newbury Park. So those are the first tranche, and as Val said, there will be an announcement, actually, I'm hoping in the next few days, if not weeks, on the next tranche of stations that we're going to apply. And I think this is, I mean, really just to really emphasise the point here. We have just had a real new look, fresh look at this in the last year as to what we can do and what is available with the available funding, the additional available funding that's been allocated to this, and what we can do in a more efficient and effective way while delivering the output that that people rightly require to ensure we have a really joined up city for everybody.
Thank you. I look forward to the announcement about here on the Hill Station in particular. If I can move on to next topic, and that is about English language tests for PHV drivers. The Mayor has written to the London Assembly regarding our recent motion on this particular subject, and he said, and I quote, "I have asked TfL to consider whether a test more targeted at the role of private hire drivers would be a better approach." Can you tell us whether, have you finished considering this matter, and what is the consideration being made now?
Well, you're quite right in that this is very much a current issue, and in fact, the Court of Appeal will be now, we're told, hearing the appeal in February of next year. So pending that, I don't think it would be appropriate to make specific changes at this moment in time, but clearly that is something we will continue to respond to whatever legal recourse ends up coming our way.
I believe you have extended the time limit to 9th of April next year.
We have.
Does it mean that between February and April you will be in a position, or you should be in a position, to tell us whether what new consideration or if there's new direction that TfL is taking on this particular matter?
Well, I think so, although I have to say I think the reason for choosing April was actually our indication is from our legal team is that it may, while the hearing is in February, it may take some time for the outcome of the hearing to be made public and made available to us.
Thank you.
Can I just advise Joe that the ever watchful Dr. Will Norman has texted me to tell me that by 2026 our expectation is that cycling as a mode share will be 1.5 to 1.8 million journeys, which is about 5% of the modal share.
Okay, Assembly Member Boff.
Perhaps you could write to us, rather than going into detail now because it's going to be technical, I was a little concerned about what you said about access for the disabled on the cheap. Worried by that, and could you allay my fears? Not now, because obviously this involves a lot of technical information, but could you write to me with that information?
Well, I think when the announcement comes out, you'll see the different types of things we'll be trying in the stations which will be announced. So it's not, when I say cheap, it does not mean poor quality. It means sometimes you can do things without incredibly heavy engineering.
And when do we expect that announcement and the details of that announcement?
Sorry?
When will that announcement come out?
I'm hoping it will be
very soon.
Within the next fortnight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm really sorry about this, but we just obviously had a backlog because of the, relentless, terrible events that have happened. And of course, there was the election before that, which I won't call it a relentless, terrible event. But, there has been a lot of pressure here and elsewhere. So I'm afraid there's been backlogs of things to get through.
But if you could write to us.
Can I just make one point, Chair, though, if I may, because and we will write to, but I think it's really just important to say publicly on record, there is no sense whatsoever that this review of the standards for accessible facilities is in any way compromising public safety or compromising any of the high quality availability that people would rightly expect from such a process. It is just the fact that we've got a new managing director of London Underground. He's come in, quite rightly, he's a professional engineer by profession, and he's quite rightly just been challenging on the basis of how much cost we've been spending all over the place, actually, and it's one of the reasons that we've been able to reduce our cost base across the organisation overall. But we'll write to you with the detail for sure.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Okay, can you send that letter to me and we'll disseminate, because certainly, like Assembly Member Boff, the hair stood on my neck. The idea that we should be trying to do anything but a quality approach for step-free access for disabled users of the
Chair,
transport.
if I gave the impression it was a poor quality approach, I'm sorry, that was wrong. But the point is that sometimes...
no, I think we understand now, and I think what we want is detailed submissions from you about that, and then
it will be illustrated in the projects
we can then explore that. Thank you. I think the last speaker or questions on this section is from Assembly Member Dr. Sahota.
Well, this question is about the rights of the private hire vehicle drivers. I think you're negotiating your license at the moment, right, with the operators. Are you able to put into the requirement the rights of workers? I mean, some people aren't paying the living wage to their drivers. That's where I'm coming from. Are you able to stipulate the conditions for workers' rights in your licensing requirements?
The consultation at the moment is about the fees that operators can be charged by TfL for receiving the licence. So that's the substance of the consultation. The framework that TfL operates, a licensing framework, is very, very legally prescribed. So I will defer to the Commissioner.
The only question I'm asking is, do you have the right to put those conditions in or not? Yes or no?
Well, no, we don't. And I think, but I think I would just say that clearly I am very conscious that the exploitation of any of these drivers is a real concern. And obviously, we would want and expect that everybody who was driving a private hire vehicle, in line with everybody else working in this city, had a decent contract of employment and was properly looked after in their line of work. I mean, that's very important to us. As Val said, we do have some we have quite limited powers in this area, and it's why we continue to work to lobby government to see what else other powers could be applied for us to use.
Okay. Policy 18 of the Mayor's draft transport strategy says the Mayor, through TfL, will seek to ensure London as a safe, secure, accessible, world-class taxi and private hire service with opportunity for all providers to flourish. Can the system be world-class if those working in it are taking home less than the London living wage?
I wouldn't use the term world-class in that scenario, no. So which is why it's in a strategy that we need to work very hard to improve just that.
So if you don't have the legislation, maybe we should be getting the powers to do that.
I agree.
You agree with that? And TfL gives them taking to get those powers?
Well, I think we've been lobbying quite heavily with government over many years now to try and improve the powers we've had on this area, but actually in particular also, as I referred to earlier on, in terms of a capping of the number of hire vehicles. These things are all related, actually, because if you just get free proliferation of the number of private hire vehicles, it does potentially lead in some cases to, I'm sure, a degree of exploitation of drivers themselves.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go to the question regarding the Garden Bridge in the name of Assembly Member Prince.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, I've answered correctly.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Yes.
I can ask the question.
Yes.
I think if I was looking
the question, Mike,
the
to
question
you
was,
is, should the Mayor have cancelled the Garden Bridge as soon as he was elected?
Yeah, got it. I'll kick off if I may. Well, that wasn't in the Mayor's manifesto, but he was very clear very early on that he did not want to spend or see any more public money spent on the Garden Bridge, and that was a commitment he made and he has fulfilled very firmly since then. So no grant payments have been made to the Garden Bridge Trust since March 2016. It is not a GLA or a TfL project. It is a project which is down to the Garden Bridge Trust to progress, and certainly we've been very clear that the Mayor has not committed to offer any support to the garden bridge for the future.
Sorry, thank you for that answer, Val. You mentioned that no money has been spent since the mayor was elected, and let's say effectively April when he cancelled the project. Can you confirm that, Mike? That is the case?
That is correct.
That's correct,
No
yeah.
money has been spent. Thank you. I think I know where you've always stood on the garden bridge, but probably in the middle. The mayor, though, seems to have been a bit all over the place. I mean, do you recall that on the 24th of September, in an Evening Standard interview, he said that he would scrap the garden bridge if he was elected?
I think what the mayor has always been clear about is that as long as there was no more public money from us going into the garden bridge, then if the trustees of the Garden Bridge Trust were able to secure money from the private sector, then he wouldn't stand in the way of its construction. And I think that he's been very clear about that to me right from day one after his election, and very clear in the messaging that I think he's given on this. So I think there's always been a sense that there was sunk cost already there that took place in the previous administration. Since then, there have been no grant payments made to the trust since the mayor was elected, as Val said, and actually it was incumbent therefore on the trustees to secure any additional funding provision that they could, and they have not been, that funding does not seem to have been forthcoming for them.
So I understand that. So when he said he was going to scrap the garden bridge, he didn't mean he was going to scrap the garden bridge. He meant something else then, did he?
I think when the mayor came into power, it was very clear that not just that there'd already been quite a lot of public money which had already been committed and spent before he arrived, but also the bridge had planning consents. And as you say, Keith, I was one of the people who objected very strongly. I wrote a 6-page letter of objection in my previous role. But those consents were extant when the mayor came into office. And I think it is obviously very difficult for a new mayor to set about unpicking something which has both had funding, public funding, and has existing planning consents from the adjacent boroughs. But what he has done, and he said he would do, and has stuck to, is no more public money has gone into this project from TfL or City Hall.
I mean, just for the record, I've always shared your position on the garden bridge as well.
That was one reason, Keith, why I didn't take on a role managing this. In fact, the Mayor's Chief of Staff has been the lead officer
that's interesting.
doing the work on this project.
So, sorry to press the point, but he said in February this year that the position I set out in May last year remains true, that given previous expenditure, the taxpayer will be better off if the bridge is built. How's that position changed now then?
Well, I think the reason that he would say that was because self-evidently there was money that was not obviously recoverable that had already been spent by public bodies, including TfL previously on this project, or contributed by public bodies previously. And therefore, given the scenario of not being able to recover the money, clearly, if the private sector, the trustees had been able to raise funds from the private sector, then clearly that would have allowed the money that had been invested by the public sector to not have been totally lost on that basis. So again, I can't, it's difficult for me to absolutely recognise what the mayor was thinking when he said whatever he said, but I think it's been pretty clear and consistent throughout, Val, in that approach.
Okay, so the position now, though, just for the record, is this project dead in the water, so to speak?
I think this depends on the Garden Bridge Trust's ability, as it always has depended on their ability to raise funds, and I think there is a funding gap there now. Obviously, it's not our project, so we don't know. I don't know exactly, but I'm told that the funding gap could now be 70 million or above, and I don't know. It could well be unlikely that the trust will successfully raise those further funds. But as I said, this is not our project. It's not a project that we are putting any public money into, and it's up to the Garden Bridge Trust to fulfil their project.
So a clear commitment that no more public money will be wasted on the bridge.
No more London public money.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Remember, Boff?
Ms Shawcross, you've stated that you didn't have an involvement with the Garden Bridge review. Did you let the Mayor know of your opinion of the Garden Bridge when he appointed you?
I certainly had that discussion with the Chief of Staff when we talked about the work on the Garden Bridge, that I had a view as a local assembly member, and I felt therefore, you know, that I would, it's probably something that I'd gone on the public record on, and that another member of staff should do the further work.
Did you advise the Mayor to conduct the review?
No, I didn't. No, because as I said, I then, you know, that work was done by another member of staff.
Right. So prior to commissioning the review, he didn't ask your advice, the Mayor didn't ask your advice as to whether or not to conduct that review. Is that right?
No, the point is that because I had very strong and public opinions on the topic, I said I shouldn't be involved in managing any work around this because I'll be seen as being prejudiced. Therefore, another member of staff took it forward, which meant that I then wasn't offering any further advice after I'd given my opinion.
You weren't in,
So it wasn't. I definitely absented myself from.
You absented yourself from. You're saying from the process of the review, but did you have any say as to whether or not the review should be conducted in the first place?
I didn't get involved in those discussions because I'd already said I've got a strong opinion on this one. It's better dealt with by people who can look at the issue independently and be seen to be independent in it. So why would I then get involved in giving the Mayor advice one way or the other, or how to do it, or who to do it?
I was just wondering whether or not you might have asked what was wrong with the Assembly review of the Garden Bridge. What was inadequate about the Assembly review of the Garden Bridge?
I didn't have that discussion, except that, you know, the Mayor and all his team are very, very well aware that the Assembly had done an awful lot of work on this issue. And one would imagine that the Margaret Hodge would look at all of that work. Why wouldn't you?
Did Margaret Hodge contact you during the period of the
No,
review?
she didn't, and I wasn't interviewed.
Thank you very much. Mr. Brown, were you interviewed by Margaret Hodge for the review?
I was indeed, yes.
Could you tell me, where did that interview take place?
It took place in an office, in her office in Portcullis House.
How were you summoned to the interview, Mr.
I was written an invitation by her to give her some availability as to when I could have a discussion with her.
Thank you. Can you remember the actual invitation itself?
But I can't remember the invitation itself. It just came in a very...
It came in your office?
It came in a letter. It was a standard letter just asking me to meet with her, which I was very happy to do, of course.
Would that be something that your office would retain?
I've no doubt they have a copy of it, yes.
Could you supply that invitation?
I see no reason why not, yeah.
Thank you. You were interviewed by Margaret Hodge. Are you happy for the full transcript of your interview to be made public?
Absolutely. There's no problem at all.
So when the review was completed, did TfL have any kind of sign-off or relationship with the review that once the review was completed?
No, the review was completed by Dame Margaret, and as far as I'm aware, then there was a series of recommendations which we responded to, and indeed, as immediately as this afternoon, that review and the recommendations from the review is going to our Programmes and Investment Committee, which is a subcommittee of the TfL board, for discussion there, and therefore it is the paper that refers to that is of course in the public domain because those papers were released a week ago.
So, to date then, you said this afternoon?
Yeah.
This afternoon.
Yeah.
So, up till now then, has TfL released any kind of opinion as to what the content of the review was about?
Well, yes, because those papers are now public, and we've been clear all along that we have accepted the recommendations. We've already put in place some changes to the way that we carry out some of our activities as a result of the report and the review, which, again, I very much welcome.
Do you know why the Mayor would want to keep the transcripts confidential?
I'm not aware of that, no.
Ms. Shawcross, are you aware why the Mayor would want to keep the
I'm
transcripts?
not aware that he has said that.
No,
and in fact, you know, as far as I understand it, Margaret Hodge had a fairly free hand in how she conducted this and did it, as I understand it, pretty solo. So, you know, it was her review. So I'm not aware that that is the case. The Mayor is very committed to transparency.
Well, it was her review. It's now our review because we paid £9,500 for it. So, are you aware why something that is in the ownership of the Mayor's office should be confidential?
Well, the report was published on the 7th of April. As I say, it contained a number of recommendations. The paper to which I'm referring to for our Programme Investment Committee is the response to those recommendations and outlines the things that TfL, under my leadership, are applying.
Right. When will we see those?
Well,
you say you got this afternoon. Those are in public?
Well, the paper is in the public domain, and that is a public paper.
It's in the Programmes and Investment Committee, which is happening this afternoon. All of those papers are published a week beforehand. I think the TfL board and its substructure is very much busier than it used to be, and there's a lot of stuff that goes into the public arena through those committees. There's a lot of detailed scrutiny. So I would encourage you to watch those papers very closely. But that paper is in the PIC committee.
But that advice to the Mayor that the transcripts should be confidential hasn't come from you?
I'm not aware that advice has been made, and it certainly hasn't come from me.
I asked him last Thursday to make those available, and he
the
declined.
first interaction I've really had with this is on making sure that TfL responds appropriately, and you know that the committee papers that were written in response to that report adequately address the recommendations from Margaret Hodge.
Thank you. I think that's all I've got. Yeah, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the third question, and that is in the name of Assembly Member Russell, Safe Routes to Schools.
We promised to establish safe walking routes to give children cleaner and safer journeys to schools, and in 2017 we will be providing 148 million of funding to London's boroughs to deliver the Healthy Streets approach, which includes improvements to these routes to school, and we have funded air quality audits at 50 primary schools, and my colleagues Dr Will Norman and obviously Shirley Rodriguez, our Deputy Mayor for Environment, are very closely involved in seeing those programmes through with our colleagues out there.
Thank you. According to the 2014-15 National Travel Survey, only 46% of children aged 5 to 10 in Greater London usually walk to school. The government's cycling and walking investment strategy sets a target to increase that percentage up to 55% by 2005. Now, to be able to get that increase in the number of children who are walking to school, we're going to need to see some very ambitious delivery around these safer walking routes so that people feel it's attractive and a pleasure and safe for their children to walk to school. So do you have a timetable on delivering on these safer routes to school?
Well, yeah, I think just on the general point, obviously we want to continue to work with all London schools, because actually this is always in the granular detail, is the importance of how you then build up to an overall positive picture. So working with London schools to encourage maximum participation in something called STARS, which is the Sustainable Travel Active Responsible Safe, and the school accreditation programme. So currently about 50% are accredited, delivering over 30,000 individual travel behaviour change activities involving some 700,000 pupils. Now, clearly,
the behaviour change is one thing, but which is important.
Yes.
But it's also about actually making these changes on our streets so that they're safer to walk along. Not only for school children, actually, it's for it's for all residents in London, but the sort of the delivery of the healthy streets. How many healthy streets have we seen so far? It's how are we going to actually see stuff changing on the street?
So this is obviously something we do in partnership with the boroughs. So the boroughs have already invested some 4.5 million in safe routes to school in the last year, which is significant through the LIPS. This level of investment will increase, as it should do, over the coming years, as a result of the record levels of funding, which we've already talked about, that will be made available to boroughs to fund the Healthy Streets programme. And also, we're working very closely with the boroughs to establish how best to record the investment in healthy routes, so we can then give you the sort of precise answer to your question that you want on the number of schemes delivered. It's fair to say a number of schemes have already been delivered, but we want to continue to progress that in detail with the boroughs so that we get the clear answer to your question. Because you're absolutely right, it is around individual schemes supporting individual walking routes to school that is important.
It is, and it's also about the boroughs having the courage to stand up to those voices that will be very loud, saying, "Oh no, we need to keep that parking space."
Yeah.
And actually, we've heard other Assembly members talking about a relaxed approach to LIP funding. Do you think the approach is still going to be relaxed to LIP funding, or do you think you're going to be a bit more directional to make sure that the ambition around traffic reduction and making the streets safer is delivered?
Well, I think, as the Deputy Mayor said earlier on, this is a balance, but I do think that we, within the overall construct of healthy streets, we are trying to be a little bit more consistent in how LIPS funding is spent across the city, and I think that follows a wide range of discussions with individual boroughs and indeed with London councils, as Val said. So I think it's not about keeping this sort of loose. I think we are trying to have a strategic sense of direction where everybody's involved.
I mean, there's two broad pots of money. There's the Healthy Streets budget within TfL, so that's doing things like funding the young travel ambassadors and the bikeability schemes, and some of the Vision Zero safety approaches, so improving safety issues. And then, of course, there's the LIPS programme. The Mayor is really keen that we should do what we can to make children safe, close to school, and get children walking. But I don't sense any pushback from the boroughs, to be honest. I think boroughs do want to do this work, and the parents strongly support it as well.
They do, but just last night, I gather, there was a meeting in Lambeth where Quiet Way 7 down to Crystal Palace has been blocked by councillors there because there was such a strong lobby from people speaking as car drivers. I'm a car driver, but I don't choose to drive a car very much. But some people speak out and then can actually block measures that are trying to make things easier for people to walk and cycle. So I'm just wondering how much support you're going to be giving to the boroughs to really deliver on this vision.
Do you know, going on the Quiet Ways thing, I mean, I think I started my comments, I had a feedback from Will about that issue, and the quiet ways are going ahead really, really well. And yes, there are some discussions locally about particular routings and sometimes there's objections. But he went to meet some residents and there was 3 people in their living room and he had a conversation with them. I feel that public opinion is coming towards delivery of some of these things now, and we should be a bit more optimistic about it. And just because we have to enter into negotiation with the borough and community about routing and design, which I think is a perfectly good and reasonable thing to do, doesn't mean at the end of the day you don't deliver a programme.
Okay. I'm going to move you on because I want to also just put on record that I think the transport strategy is fantastic. It's got an awful lot of really exciting vision in it, and in particular the recognition of the problem of car dependency and including a traffic reduction target. Now, I called on the Mayor to do that last year, and I'm really glad it's in there. But getting traffic down is the absolute key to unlocking the success of the transport strategy. The traffic reduction target you've got of 10 to 15% by 2041, is that a cut from current levels of traffic, so an absolute cut, or is it a cut from anticipated future levels of traffic?
The cuts generally, certainly on the freight side, the cut of 10% is against a growth wind of about 35%. So, so it's against current levels, but it is worked through in the context of the pressure that is coming into the system, which is very profound.
Okay, and does it assume that workplace parking levies and road pricing schemes will be in place? And if so, when would they start?
Well, we've asked the boroughs in the LIPS guidance to come forward with their local transport strategies, including traffic reduction strategies, and how they go about working those through is very much up to them. But we have in that document said that they can look at whether or not they want to try a workplace parking levy scheme and whether or not a localised congestion charging scheme as part of a broader plan would make sense for their area.
Okay, thank you. I'll maybe take that up outside this meeting. I also just want to pick up on Silvertown Tunnel because it seems to be a sort of glaring anomaly in this whole strategy, which is about reducing traffic. We know that building new roads creates new traffic. You've just been talking to previous Assembly members about the public transport, walking and cycling function for this tunnel. Are you saying that there will be no private car use in that tunnel?
No, we're not saying that.
So in which case it is new road capacity, and the arguments against building new road capacity, creating more traffic, would stand?
Well, I think the imperative, though, is on the public transport role that it plays, and I think that is something that we have not been as effective in getting across as the point I made earlier on, in terms of the number of bus routes that you can get across the river and the connections that you therefore achieve. And of course,
I'm out of time, but I hope that we can continue that conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to meet with you offline, by the way, on that subject.
Thank you.
Very happy to.
Okay, thank you very much. May I thank the Deputy Mayor and the Commissioner for their attendance and for answering the Assembly's questions today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's go to Part B. Can we now turn to the motion set out on the agenda in my name in relation to the question and answer session, namely to note the answers to the question asked? Agreed? There is a tabled amendment to this motion. Please can I call on Assembly Member Bacon? Every members have seen the motion? Yes, and read? Yeah, absolutely. Can I call on Assembly Member Bacon to move the amendment?
Opening my remarks in making this amendment, I want to make clear that it's not in any way about our former Assembly colleague Val Shawcross's attendance today. It's always a pleasure to see her in this chamber, and she is very understanding, I think, of the Assembly's function, having been a serving member here for 16 years, so she knows what this place is about. It's a shame that that isn't being spread around the building. Now, it is acknowledged that this meeting had to be rearranged because of PERDA, because of the snap general election. But the fact remains that the Mayor should have prioritised this meeting, and he should have been here because this is his transport strategy. There are some radical, contentious and potentially game-changing policies in this strategy, and he has a duty to attend the Assembly meeting and account for that. Both of his predecessors made a point of appearing in front of the Assembly after launching their transport strategy, and in fact, although I wasn't here at the time, I've heard from people who were that it was very difficult to actually stop Ken Livingstone from attending Assembly meetings. Now, if this were a one-off, it would be easier to let go. But those of us who attended the Bureau of Leaders meetings this year will have noted his absence in all bar a couple of those meetings in the 14 months that he has been Mayor. At the last meeting held last week, he didn't turn up and he didn't even bother to send his Chief of Staff to that meeting or anybody else from his office. And also last week, last Thursday, he left Mayor's Question Time at 12:30, allegedly because he had to rush off to Brixton to attend a memorial service, but I have it on good authority that he was cited still in this building over an hour later. Now, he could and should have finished Mayor's Question Time, and he could and should have attended this meeting this morning. Now, when taken together, a pattern of behaviour is starting to emerge here, and it's not one that looks very good. The Mayor is starting to show borderline contempt for the Assembly, and this needs to stop. The Assembly is elected with a democratic mandate to scrutinise the Mayor and hold him to account, and I'm sure that being on the receiving end of that can sometimes be unpleasant at times. But both of his predecessors, both Ken Livingstone and Boris Johnson, in their tenures as Mayor, accepted our mandate and our right to scrutinise them. This Mayor needs to do the same, and so I hope the Assembly will send him a very strong message today and approve the amended motion unanimously.
Thank you, Assembly Member Bacon. Assembly Member Oliver, Deputy Chair.
Well, it all started so well. When the Mayor was elected, he clearly was someone who represented London. He came to our meetings and he made it clear that together we had a joint role in representing London. And it went extremely well. I speak today in sorrow rather than in anger on this matter. It is the function of the Assembly to scrutinise the Mayor, and we cannot scrutinise him in absentia. I do fear, as Assemblymember Bacon has said, that this is indicative perhaps of a slippery slope whereby we are increasingly bypassed. I have noted a trend whereby the Mayor has become increasingly presidential. Today, we have had the London crime strategy. There are 13 photographs of the Mayor inside the London knife crime strategy. The Mayor represents London. He has been doing so exceedingly successfully. The way he rose to the challenge of the awful events that there have been over the past month was exemplary. But he cannot do this entirely on his own. We all have been elected. There ought to be some kind of equality and acknowledgement of the fact that we all represent London together, and we do not wish to see, and I very much hope that the Mayor does not himself wish to see, that somehow or another he is apart from us, because by being apart from us he is being apart from those who elected us to represent them in this place. So, as I say, it is with sorrow that I support this proposal.
Thank you. Do I see any? Thank you. Yes, I thank both speakers. I think they've made their point really clear, and the motion in front of you, I think we can go to that vote. So do I need a seconder for that?
You can just put in the amendment to the
Okay,
vote.
so let's move the amendment to the vote. Can I see all those in favour of the amendment?
It's unanimous, Chair.
Right, that amendment has unanimous support of this Assembly.
Just need to put the revised motion to the vote now.
Okay, can I then put the revised motion to members? Can I see those in support of the revised motion?
It's unanimous.
Thank you. The revised motion has unanimous support of this Assembly. Thank you. Right, let's go then to petition update. Can I ask the Assembly to note the responses received to petition presented at recent Assembly plenary meetings? Noted. And item 5, we now come to motions, and members will have received a supplementary agenda which was circulated with an additional motion. Apologies from my office, this was omitted from the original report, although it was submitted in time. Can I also draw members' attention to the fact that the motion in the name of Assembly Member Cooper has been withdrawn. So, in relation to motion in the name of Assembly Member Russell, I consider this motion should be considered as a matter of urgency. Please can I ask the Assembly to agree to consider the urgent motion under Standing Order 3.12. Agreed? Yes, thank you. And Assembly Member Berry will now second the motion.
Assembly Member Russell to move.
And can I call on Assembly Member Russell to move the motion in front of us?
Thank you, Madam Chair. By withdrawing from the Paris Climate Agreement, President Trump has made the worst business decision in history. He clearly doesn't understand the art of the deal. It makes no economic sense. This reckless act of ignorance will have enormous environmental, economic and health consequences for current and future generations. Instead of becoming the president known for solving the biggest global challenge of our time, he will go down in history as the president who made things worse. Instead of investing in the clean technologies of the future, Trump has decided to invest in the dirty technologies of the past that are polluting our air, destroying our environment, and are increasingly uneconomic to use. Earlier this week, mayors and leaders of 250 US cities made a public commitment to 100% renewable energy by 2035, showing that they get it where their president doesn't. The evidence on climate change is overwhelming. The US Environment Protection Agency estimated that inaction or inadequate action on tackling climate change will cost the US hundreds of billions of dollars in economic losses. The consequences of inaction are devastating, irreversible, and unimaginable. Yet President Trump has chosen to ignore the economic evidence and the 97% of all scientists that agree that human activity is driving climate change. As predicted, our climate is getting warmer and warmer. 2016 was the hottest year on record, setting a new high for the third year in a row. Both the UK Met Office and NASA have shown 16 of the 17 hottest years on record have been in this century, and we're just in the 17th year of it. What does global warming mean to us? It's more extreme temperatures, acidification of oceans, rising sea levels, declining glaciers, and increased incidence of extreme and unpredictable weather events, decreasing our ability to sustain livelihoods and feed communities across the planet. The President's decision could wreck the world's chances of keeping warming below the 1.5 degrees required to meet the Paris Agreement. It means renewed efforts are required of other countries and major global cities, such as London, to intensify our work to decarbonise and tackle climate change. That is why the Mayor of London must step up and do even more to lead the way to help protect our future generations and the one planet that we have. The Mayor must make sure his forthcoming environment strategy and programmes are consistent with the Paris Agreement. He can work harder with the C40 city leaders to adopt even stronger measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. He can reach out to all the US mayors and governors that have vowed to keep fighting global warming and to honour and uphold the Paris Climate Change Agreement. Climate change can be a top priority for the Mayor's remaining time in office. He can lobby and hold the Conservative government accountable for their bonfire of renewables, their decision to slash subsidies for solar, and their removal of support for onshore wind. He can push to ensure that the government ratification of the Paris Climate Change Agreement is matched by actions and not just sound bites. I move the motion.
Thank you. Can I have Assembly Member Berry to second the motion?
Formally second, thank you, Chair.
Formally second. Members have in front of them an amendment to this motion. Can I have Assembly Member Cooper move her tabled amendment?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not going to speak for very long to put forward this amendment. The Labour Group, in the main, supports the bulk of the motion, and Caroline has set out, Assemblymember Russell has set out in the terms why we also condemn, in the strongest possible terms, President Trump's decision to abandon the Paris Climate Change Agreement. And we're entirely critical of his decision to do that. However, we put this motion down because we think it's somewhat unfair to imply that the Mayor has not shown leadership on this issue of climate change over the past year since he was elected. Firstly, the Mayor has been particularly vocal in his criticisms of the actions of President Trump, stating, now more than ever, world leaders must recognise the threat of climate change and join forces to protect public health, reduce toxic pollution and help sustain a greener planet. Secondly, the Mayor has also shown leadership in tackling climate change in terms of his own environmental policies and actions. His answer to my very first Mayor's question, which I asked in this very room, was to say that he had joined Client Earth's action in trying to force a decent air quality action plan for this nation. And I think that shows his approach to emission reduction very clearly, which is absolutely critical for tackling climate change effectively. He's commissioned, as we just heard earlier today, hydrogen buses. The retrofit of 5,500 buses has just been announced this week. He will be purchasing electric and hybrid buses. The zero-emission capable taxi and forcing taxi drivers from this year onwards to start buying the zero-emission capable taxi is going ahead. The plans to introduce the T-charge from September 2018 and bring forward the Central London ULEZ ultra-low emission zone to April 2019 are well advanced, as is the overall expansion of the ULEZ in 2020. We see real leadership here. Therefore, we have amended the motion to welcome the Mayor's work to date and to call on the Mayor to continue demonstrating his leadership over the next 3 years. Finally, there's another small amendment that we've made to the motion. We don't think it's quite appropriate to call on the Mayor to investigate the effects of Trump's decision on London, as we think that's probably a bit beyond the general Greater London Authority remit, so we've also would like to remove that. However, we too are very, very keen to see that the Mayor's environment strategy is consistent with the Paris Climate Change Agreement, and we recognise the special importance of this in the context of President Trump's decision to withdraw. I move. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I call upon Assemblymember Duval to second this amendment?
I formally second and reserve my right to speak during the debate, Chair.
Okay. Can I open the debate on this motion? Okay. Assemblymember Boff.
I won't be supporting the amendment or the motion because it falls into the category of comfortable politicians' virtue signalling. It's just such a clumsy motion. It asks at the end, for example, that climate change be a top priority. Well, actually, climate change is a priority established by the Paris Agreement. It is a national priority. Of course it is. Reference to Trump is just this Assembly trying to develop its own foreign affairs policy. But if you look at that last thing about the climate change being a top priority, it was that narrowness of thinking that one particular aspect should be a top priority that means we have so many diesel cars on the road today. It's as a result of that muddled political gesturing that we are now in a situation where we've got to invest heavily in buses. I mean, we wish the Mayor would invest as heavily in making the buses climate change friendly as we as a group have suggested in our report, Gareth Bacon's report, A Breath of Fresh Air. We want the Mayor to invest in these kind of issues. But there's no particular aspect that's referred to in this motion. It just makes us all feel very comfortable that we're nice people and thinking about the planet. Well, actually, this does nothing. It's the same old, tired old rhetoric that produced the problem that we have with diesel at the moment, and it's not going to move the world forward. We want to see motions that do things, not ones that just say things and make us feel good.
Thank you. Assembly Member Curtin.
Thank you, Chair. Also with Assembly Member Boff, I won't be supporting this motion. This motion is a little bit of Trump bashing. Whatever you think about President Trump, it really isn't the place of the London Assembly to be deliberating on what he does as the President of the United States. But there is another reason why I don't support this, is because I don't support the Paris Climate Agreement. And I represent my party in this. And
the member's got the floor.
I'll tell you why.
It's not right.
And it's maybe something that you haven't considered. And I'm sure all of you around here who have put the motion and support the motion are sincere in your support for it and think that you're doing a good thing for the world. But in the crazy carbon accounting system of the Paris Climate Agreement and also of the European Union, burning wood is apparently carbon neutral. It is not, even though they say it is. You may be aware that our largest power station in this country is called Drax. And under the 2015 EU Large Combustion Plant Directive, large power stations like Drax had to stop burning coal. But we still need the energy from that, so they converted to start burning wood. Now, burning wood is vastly environmentally destructive. We import 7.5 million tonnes of wood cut down from trees, mostly in North Carolina, that are shipped across the Atlantic to Liverpool, taken by lorry to Drax and burned to produce less than 10% of our energy. This is called carbon neutral, but it is a huge environmental massacre. Billions of animals that live in those forests in North Carolina and other places which we chop down lose their habitats every year. If we continue with the Paris Climate Agreement without considering that burning wood is vastly environmentally destructive, we will think that we're doing a good thing, but we're not, because we're actually facilitating the destruction of the environment and deforestation in North and South America and many other places in the world. And that is why I can't support the Paris Climate Agreement. I know you think it's a good thing, but if you delve into the details, it's really, really a bad thing. If every country in the world did what Britain is doing and converting our fossil fuel power stations to burn wood, we would very, very quickly deforest the whole world. And I think that that's something that I can't support. And I hope that you will, this gives you a little different angle in thinking about it and thinking that what we do, we need to be responsible and consider unintended consequences and not just virtue signal. Thank you.
Thank you, Assembly Member Curtin. No other speakers, so I'm going to go back now and ask... no, she is on my list. So you formally moved. Assembly Member Duval, do you wish to speak?
And reserve my right to
You
speak.
did. I'm calling you now.
Okay, all right. Can I just say, Assembly Member Curtin, you are a very honest politician, and I think added a very interesting dimension to the debate, but your general thrust is wrong, because you have to look at the Paris Agreement as a whole, and I think the issues in terms of what our colleagues in the Conservatives, God knows what happened during their Conservative group meeting, because I thought they were going to be supporting this motion in terms of that, like their government supports the Paris Agreement, because actually, and this is where Assembly Member Curtin's wrong, the actions of a president in the United States does affect us in terms of that, not just the moral leadership to lead the change around that needs to take place to try to reverse or to deal with some of the consequences of climate change. And that's why it's important that we do. It's not about establishing a foreign policy, it's about the impact of people's actions. And that single action of the US walking away from moral responsibilities to each other. We have moral responsibilities of each other in terms of tackling some of the great issues of the day. And along with the Mayor, and I will say this, because actually the shame of the previous 8 years, the mayoral incumbent who delayed and shilly-shallied over doing something around air quality and some of those issues, I don't think we need to take any lectures. It's very interesting proposals from the Conservative group, but I didn't hear you tackle the Boris bus issue when you introduced what he claimed to be the most environmentally friendly bus, which turns out to be the most polluting bus, and probably in terms of some of the issues. So in that sense, I think we should agree this motion. I think, wordings of motions and saying why we can't agree with it or not, you shouldn't be sending mixed messages. As I said before, your government supports the Paris Agreement. Actually, your party, generally, the thinking ones in your party support the general thrust of these issues. And I'm will out some Conservatives who say some pretty wicked things about Trump as well. I don't understand the Conservative group on the London Assembly of why they can't support this motion. And really, put up your own motion and let's see a doing motion from you so we can have a debate about that. Because I look forward to seeing one of those motions in terms of the future. Supporting the amendment and supporting, hopefully, if it's agreed, the final motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Assemblymember Cooper, right of reply to anything you've heard?
I mean, I must say I am, like Assemblymember Duval, I'm a bit disappointed to hear that there are a number of members who are actually considering voting against this. And I thought the points that Assemblymember Curtin makes are extremely well made. I'm actually also very concerned about not just wood as a biofuel, but the growth of plantations of other types of biofuel, which I think produces monocultures around the world, and then there's an awful lot of energy is then used in transporting these things around. And I'm sure if you'd written some sort of amendment to this motion that said we call upon the Mayor to, put biofuels somewhere at the bottom of his strategy, and I'm sincerely hoping that when we see the environment strategy and energy for Londoners, that there's no mention of biofuels as being of importance in the context of London at all. I think that's an interesting and very well-made point, and there's much that I would support there. But to then, and this is the problem with Assemblymember Boff as well, to then vote against it, my understanding is that, the new Environment Secretary, whatever his name is, Gove, I think, along with the Prime Minister, is also supporting the Paris Agreement. So I don't understand why you would not wish to support both the amendment and hopefully the finally amended motion. And if you wanted to add something in about issues relating to special concerns about biofuels, I can't speak for the movers of the original motion, but certainly I know that there is great concern about biofuels across the whole of what I would probably call the environmental movement. So not virtue signalling, absolutely critical in the light of what President Trump has done. It's an international statement that he's made. It's not just a backyard issue for America. It's a joint climate. It's why we need to tackle air quality for the whole of London. We can't. It's not just something that affects people in, I don't know, Catford or Wimbledon. It's something that we need to tackle overall, and it's the same with the climate. And we do only have just the one planet. Thank you very much, Chair.
Assemblymember Berry.
Thank you, Chair. I hope I'm not too late to speak in favour of the amendment. I do support it. I think the Labour group know that we already said we do agree with this. I particularly like the addition of a comment on Brexit, because I think one of the biggest threats to our environment and all manner of environmental initiatives and regulations is the Tory mess that is Brexit and the new government partners that they have adopted in the DUP. Caroline Lucas this week got official permission to call them dinosaurs in Parliament. It is parliamentary language to call the DUP dinosaurs, and they are absolutely the most climate-denying party in Parliament. We do support adopting the amendment, and I think it is important that London comments on matters of national and international significance. This is an important issue. Climate change is the most important issue in terms of having a future and London having a future, and it's absolutely right that we should be talking about these issues here.
Thank you. Summation from Assemblymember Russell.
Thank you, Chair. As Assembly Member Berry said, I am very happy to accept the amendment. I think in relation to what Assembly Member Boff had to say, the issue with diesel cars was an issue of not actually taking climate change properly seriously. If we were doing that, we would have seen measures to reduce our dependence on cars, to increase investment in public transport, increase the investment in electrification of our rail lines, and actually enable people to live well without a car, rather than having this solution of cars that were supposed to be emitting less CO2, but have actually ended up causing a massive public health problem. So, you know, actually your point makes the point that we have to actually take these issues seriously. I completely agree that burning biofuels is not a good idea. We've seen the DUP with their cash for ash scandal, which is all about burning fuels. And clearly burning biofuels is not going to be, is not a solution that in any way helps to tackle climate change. And as Assemblymember Cooper has already said, she would be very surprised to see it, biofuels taking any kind of place in the Mayor's environment strategy when it comes out. So I am very happy to accept the amendment, and yes, that's it.
So you're moving the motion?
Oh, sorry, yes. Do I move the amended motion?
Yes, if you've accepted it.
Sorry, I move the amended motion.
Okay, thank you very much. Therefore, we can, the amendment has been accepted, so we can then move to a vote on the amended motion. Can I see those in favour?
11.
11 in favour. Those against?
2.
2 against. Do I have to call for abstentions? No, we don't. The motion is passed. 11 for, 2 against. Thank you very much. Item 6, date of the next meeting. The next meeting of London Assembly is scheduled to be the plenary meeting, which will take place at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 6th July, in the Chamber. That meeting will be chaired by the Deputy Chair.
No, it won't.
No? Oh, no, I'm
not
chairing
here.
that.
You're doing it. I do the next one.
It's the week after.
I should be in the chair. Absolutely. Bringing the meeting to an early close, if possible. Item 7. There is no urgent business requiring consultation, so I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.
GLA Chamber Sound. GLA Chamber Sound.